Good afternoon, everyone. So one of my areas of research and interest is compression. Let's see if I can tell you in 10 minutes about deepfakes by compressing the information without too much loss. And then you will know if I succeed or not, how good I might be in compression. But let's start things first by making a few statements. Well, we know and we live now, after 20, 30 years, of a lot of technological advances in a world where multimedia content, and not only text, is produced by just anybody, and it's consumed anywhere by just anybody, right? So the old days where we had only just a few professionals producing content and just a few channels, and then everybody else was the audience and recipient, are over. There are many reasons this has happened. Technology is not the only reason. There are a few others. I think one very important one is the generational change. I think my grandparents were not much into tweeting. It didn't even exist. Myself, I forced myself, but my kids, they are definitely very much into generating content. They don't use necessarily the same tools, by the way, right? I use mostly Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter. They use other things. TikTok is on the top, but there are other things too. So let's not forget that all this information, whether we want it or not, some of it at least, is going to create a situation where we will have misleading information, disinformation, malinformation even. And one thing I want to now focus on is the pictures. Pictures play a very, very important role in disinformation. And the reasons are very simple. Pictures, they really can hide a lot of messages without really telling them, right? So pictures actually replace, and there is a saying in English that says a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you can actually hide by the way you pick and represent the picture something that we receive as information that is much, much richer. The other reason this information is very much affected by this kind of media, pictures, visual information, video, etc., is because we are kind of wired, or at least used to, believe what we see. And it actually, in disinformation, also used a lot, right? It's very easy to put a face of somebody well-known next to a text. It makes the text much more believable. But in fact, as some have said before, seeing is just seeing, is not believing. And there is nothing new about this. In fact, the history of use of visual information that has been manipulated in order to manipulate opinions goes back to before pictures even existed. Because before that, pictures were called portraits. Some people were drawing them. You could find their roots back as early as some manipulated pictures of Abraham Lincoln that were actually paintings. And the body of somebody who had a much more presidential posture, let's say, was used on top of the face of Abraham Lincoln. And throughout the history, and we don't have time to go through that, maybe during the panel we can talk more about that, we have reached a point where today, on some medias, we have deepfakes that are virtually undistinguishable from the real thing. And this has been, since we are in an AI conference, in large part thanks to AI, right? So AI now allows to create completely virtual characters, people who don't exist in real, and create images that are not true, right? Even as recent as 2 weeks ago, right? And you could imagine deepfakes, and one of the reasons we have to be very careful about is that deepfakes can be, in conflicts even, used as means of communication for propaganda or misinformation. And of course, none of this is new. There is a lot of effort that has existed in the past since over 100 years ago in order to really find out whether some picture has been manipulated or not. This is image forensics. That has, of course, the same way the technology has changed in the last 100+ years also has changed. But this is nothing new. Now, I just want to conclude this discussion and set the ground maybe for later on when we discuss, to tell you that there are basically two ways this technology works. There are many, many different ways you can do them, but they are really roughly in two categories. One is called reactive, the other one is proactive. Reactive is basically how you detect, right? We are used to reactive. When we get sick, we take medicine. When some spam goes around, we have detectors for it, etc. But reactive comes with a lot of challenges, right? One of the challenges, and I just want to mention just one of them, is that because it's a cat and mouse problem, the detectors are always behind those who manipulate information. So you're always catching up with something, and especially in disinformation, often the information can mislead in the first few hours or few days it has been spread, not a month later. So these methods necessarily do not really work well. The other way approach is proactive, right? So proactive approaches basically is like vaccinating people or in doing things before the thing happened. The technology that is used is called provenance in the jargon of forgery detection. And basically you keep a trace of the journey of the information from its start, either if it was synthesized from nothing or it was captured with a device like camera, all the way to the day you are consuming that. And it doesn't tell you whether it is fake or not. It doesn't tell you whether you have believed it or not. It just tells you what was its journey. And you decide whether you want to consume it or not and whether you want to believe it or not. And sometimes, in fact, as you know, deepfakes have been used for entertainment purposes, and it's just fun, right? It makes people laugh, makes some entertaining dimension in it, and it's great. Of course, work is going on to make these proactive approaches as mature as the detectors that are really the majority of techniques that are used today for detection of forgery. But there are two keys that are very, very important to mention. Again, I don't have time to go to all the details, but the two are, one is interoperability, the other one is security. Interoperability because if you want to tell what is the journey, let's say, of a picture, then everybody has to do the same, right? Because otherwise, some people do it in one way, some other another way. This information is not going to work. So you need standards and conventions to do that. The second one is that the information you create this way should be secured. Because those who can forge content, well, they can forge also metadata, right? So you have to make that. But forging metadata is usually easier, and protecting the forging also is easier than content that is multimedia. Let me just close by telling you, coming from somebody who is in technology, that technology is not a solution to everything, right? So technology definitely undeniably created the deepfake phenomenon, but it's not going to be the solution for it. Of course, it will be part of the solution, but there are two very important aspects we have to keep in mind. One is the education and social challenge that we have, right? In fact, the fact that we should not anymore believe what we see and put it in question the same way when we receive an email that tells us, oh, I'm a prince in Nigeria and I have 10 billion, want to give you 1 billion, send me your account number and name and passport number. You don't believe it. So here also, anything you see should not be believed. The second one is the legal aspects. The legal aspects of the whole thing. So you cannot break the law if there are no rules that tells you to be against this. And this is also a very, very important aspect that is a little bit controversial. You mentioned the Swiss secrets. So we have to be careful not to hope for something because you might get it, right? So laws can be used both to solve or make the problem worse. Thank you very much. I just want to just remind everybody that we are just in the beginning of this history of disinformation using artificial intelligence especially. And we should not forget that this is a history that is not yet written. So it's very, very hard actually to assess the state of things when the history is being written. It's not a reason not to do it, but it is very, very hard to have conclusion at this moment of time. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Touradj. As you will be with us on the panel later, we just know maybe we take one question, but then we have a discussion later. Yeah.
20 or 30 years ago, a photograph basically meant absolute truth. But then after time, Photoshop came in, and we live in a world where we know images are Photoshopped, yet we somehow are able to kind of figure out what to believe in and what not to believe in. Now, deepfakes are coming in. That's a more advanced version of semantically manipulating the images. So why should we be that worried that over the next 5 or 10 years, the way we perceive Photoshopped images, the way we will not perceive deepfake videos or deepfake images?
Yeah, your observation is perfectly correct. And by the way, it's a very, very good question. The reason deepfakes are probably more dangerous for the misinformation is because a Photoshop, you need some skills to go and do it, right? You cannot just give it to your grandmother and say, touch this picture and change it to something, right? You need really skillful people. And by the way, this didn't happen only with the appearance of Photoshop, right? So forgery has always existed. Just that 30 years ago, even when it was not digital, there were people who knew, and they really acquired that skill. This is not going to be thanks to artificial intelligence and requirement anymore. So a lot of these deepfake programs, they are for free. You can just download them. They are not perfectly accessible to just my grandmother, but they are getting there. And a lot of people without necessarily a lot of skills, they can actually use them for free, right? And that's where the danger comes, right? So anybody has democratized the skill and is bringing the skill and delegating the skill to artificial intelligence. That's where things are really very different from the past.